Welcome back, everybody, to another one of my aviation history videos. And today we're out at the War Museum. I'm actually filming here on the back side. The front side's set up for Blues Fest. I can't really get a good view over there. My beautiful hometown of Ottawa, here on the shores of the Ottawa River. The War Museum might seem like a weird place to be filming an aviation history video, but the War Museum actually holds a number of aviation artifacts. They have three full-size airframes, one partial airframe, as well as a large number of military aviation related artifacts. And I'm going to do 3 videos here today, and let's hop on in and take a quick look at what I want to talk about. Oh, and as always, my name is Sean, and this is Sean's Aviation. So the War Museum has a really interesting flow where after you're done the upstairs galleries, you come down through the stairwell with the Vimy Memorial models, and then you end up down here in the tank gallery. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a giant room full of tanks. And I could spend hours in here just wandering around looking at all the different tanks. And it also has there it is, CF-101. But it's not why I'm here. What I'm here for is just around the corner. So as you're leaving the tank gallery, which is just behind me here, and you come up this long hallway and you start heading back out towards the main lobby, up here is what I'm here for. And these are actual nose art panels from Canadian RCAF Halifaxes in World War II. And the story about how they got here and the story behind each airframe is what we're going to talk about today.
At the end of World War II, the RAF had all the surplus Halifaxes moved to one of 2 locations for scrapping, either Rockcliffe in Yorkshire, interesting coincidence on names there, or High Urquhart in Shropshire. An enterprising RCAF member, Flight Lieutenant Harold Lindsay, who was stationed in High Wycombe, felt that it was important that some of these airframes be documented before they were scrapped. He was given approval to head out to the 2 sites to take pictures, and in total he shot 63 different nose arts, of which 54 were Canadian-flown airframes. He was driven around the sites by one Robert Goodwin, who was an employee involved in the scrapping of these airframes. Whether it was officially sanctioned or not has never been nailed down, but a number of the airframes were marked, and Goodwin later went back and saved those marked airframes' nose arts. These panels were shipped back to Canada, and they arrived in Ottawa on May 7th of 1946 and put into storage. Research in the 1970s seems to indicate that 17 panels were shipped, but only 14 are currently held by the War Museum. In 2005, with the opening of the new War Museum location, these panels were finally put on public display. So let's go through and take a quick look at each aircraft in detail in alphabetical order. And credit to the Bomber Command Museum for the history on each airframe. And a quick note, most of the panels have aircraft details written on the back, and I will include pictures of those where able from the War Museum's archives. Let's start with Archie the Archer. This was a Halifax Mark III, serial LL575, and was a hard-luck aircraft but survived to end up in the scrap heap at Rockcliffe. It was assigned to number 420 Squadron on July 14th of 1944, but did not carry out any operations. The aircraft was then transferred to 415 Squadron, where it completed 33 missions. On October 6th, Flight Officer Regimball and crew took her to Dortmund. On return to base, she blew a tire upon landing and received minor damage. On October 15th, Flight Officer Chartier and crew flew her to Wilhelmshaven, where flak damaged the port elevator. On her next operation to Essen on the 23rd, 24th of October, Flight Officer Brown, the Halifax was attacked by a Focke-Wulf 190. The mid-upper turret returned fire, and by utilizing a corkscrew maneuver, it lost the German fighter. November 2nd of 1944, the crew took off for a raid on Dusseldorf, and the port engine began to smoke and a starboard engine overheated. The bomb load was jettisoned and the aircraft returned to base. That was the last of this airframe's 42nd air operations. The aircraft was then transferred to number 1666 Heavy Conversion Unit and later the 1664 Heavy Conversion Unit. While there, it carried out 2 training flights and both involved accidents. On December 7th, she caught fire on an engine run-up, and the port engine and wing were damaged and subsequently repaired. Then, on February 20th, the aircraft taxied into Halifax LL589 from behind, and considerable damage to the nose, which you can actually see in a wartime picture here. The next aircraft we'll look at is Avenging Angel, Halifax serial number NP755. It was delivered to 432 Squadron on October 15th of 1944. The aircraft completed 28 operations until it was severely damaged while landing on November 18th. 19 of these operations were flown by the crew of Flight Officer Say, who originated the name and nose art. The 30th operation was flown by Wing Commander McDonald to Duisburg. Following this operation, the artist painted operational wings, a tour for a crew with 30 operations, plus a large red heart with a single wing. Avenging Angel finished the war with 70 operations, the last to Wangerooge on May 25th of 1945. The next aircraft we'll look at is Dragon. This was a Mark V Halifax, serial LK947. It was delivered to 428 Squadron on October 15th of 1943, where it completed 8 operations between October 22nd, 23rd, and January 21st, 22nd of 1944. Flight Sergeant E. O'Connor and crew flew her on the first 4 operations to Kassel, Dusseldorf, Mannheim, and Berlin. On January 14th of 1944, the Halifax was transferred to number 429 Squadron, completing 4 operations, the last being a trip to Moulins-les-Meadoux on March 2nd and 3rd. Once again, the Mark V was transferred, this time to 434 Squadron, arriving on March 5th of 1944. The Halifax completed 7 more operations, her last to the Frisian Islands on May 7th of 1944, flown by Flight Sergeant Wood. The aircraft was then assigned to 1659 and 1669 heavy conversion units for training purposes prior to being designated for disposal. While the Halifax completed only 19 operations, this photo clearly shows a total of 24 white bombs. This discrepancy has never been sorted as to where the extra 5 bombs came from. Green Dragon is the only panel in the Canadian War Museum collection that came from an aircraft disposed at High Urquhart. Next, we have Indian Head, Halifax Mark III MZ655. It was delivered to 431 Squadron and carried the markings RVT, but it had no name. However, the Indian with headdress was painted on the nose, which was quite appropriate as 431 Squadron was the RCAF's Iroquois Squadron, and a similar head was the crest logo. MZ655 completed 39 operations from May 24th, 25th, 1944 until September 16th, 1944, when it was damaged in a minor accident. The aircraft was repaired and sent to number 1659 Heavy Conversion Unit, where it remained until the end of the war. Next, we have aircraft Jake Sent Me. It has a large red maple leaf for nose art and smaller leaves for bomb tally backgrounds. This was a Halifax Mark III, serial LK828, and is truly Canadian. It was delivered to 431 Squadron on March 20th, 1944, and flew its first operation to Noisy-le-Sec, France on April 18th. During its next 39 operations, 20 different crews flew in Jake Sent Me. On June 12th to 13th, 1944, Warrant Officer 2nd Class Scaife flew her to Arras. During this operation, the mid-upper gunner destroyed an enemy night fighter, a symbol for which was painted as part of the nose art. The SCAF crew flew LK828 on 6 operations, the most in the squadron, and most likely gave her the nose art name. Her 40th and last operation was to Sterkrad on September 27th of 1944, piloted by Flying Officer Hagar. On September 29th of 1944, the aircraft was transferred to 1659 Heavy Conversion Unit for training duties. On November 27th, while practicing 3-engine landings, she overshot and ended up in a ditch. It was quickly repaired and then flown to Rockcliffe for storage. Next, we have Jumpin' Jiminy, a Halifax Mark VII, serial PN236, and this was delivered to 432 Squadron on the 28th of February of 1945. However, it did not carry out any operations. On March 7th, it was transferred to 415 Squadron, where it completed 17 operations. Of these, 11 were flown by Flying Officer Milbank and his crew. Next is Notorious Nan, Halifax Mark VII NP747. This was delivered to 408 Squadron on August 10th of 1944 and became the property of a ground crew made up of Gale, Howley, Shearer, Jackson, and Ledger. The aircraft was assigned code letters EQN, and the ground crew decided to name her Notorious Nan. LAC Jackson painted the nose art that featured a pinup lady with the name Notorious Nan. At a later date, the nose art received a background that included a full yellow moon, a green palm tree, and waves of water. The aircraft completed her first operation on August 25th, 26, 1944, flown by the squadron CO, Wing Commander McLernell, who piloted the aircraft for a total of 4 times. From August 25th to the 14th of October, Nan completed 19 operations flown by 11 different crews. The aircraft's 19th and last operation was a daylight trip to Duisburg on October 14th of 1944. The bomber was damaged by flak, and while attempting a 3-engine landing, the pilot overshot and the starboard undercarriage collapsed. The next morning, LAC Shearer had his photo taken under the nose for the last time. The ground crew recovered Nan and towed her back to the hangar. The bomber was repaired and ferried to the graveyard at Rockcliffe. Next, we have old dadi. Now, this is actually tail art, and it was very rare on these British aircraft to have, on any really World War II aircraft, to have tail art. But this was one of 2 Halifaxes that actually carried it. Now, this was from aircraft LW-207, which was delivered to 420 Squadron on 13th of June 1944, but flew no operations. The aircraft was then transferred to 426 Squadron, where it completed 58 operations from June 21st to April 25th, 1945. On May 13th, the aircraft was transferred to 408 Squadron. Now, as well as the old dadi tail art, this Halifax also carried impressive nose art, which is Willie the Wolf from the West, which we'll see some pictures of in a little bit. Now, please note that in the original photograph above, you can clearly see that old Deadeye's bits are hanging out at the bottom. And in preparation for display, that was actually painted out to be a little bit more, PC for modern takes. The next aircraft we'll look at is Veni Vidi Vici, Halifax NP 714. This was assigned to 426 Squadron on July 14th of 1944, but flew no sorties. It was then assigned to 408 Squadron and flew her first operation to Saint-Loup des on August 5th. The nose art was originally painted on fabric and then applied to the nose of the Halifax. On August 8th, the bomber flew its 3rd operation by flying Officer Johnson and crew, and it became their aircraft. The crew called the aircraft Veni Vidi Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. The Johnson crew flew 25 operations in their Halifax and completed a total of 30 operations between August 8th and December 28th, 1944. Halifax NP 714 went on to complete a total of 66 operations. The artwork was never named, and it featured a girl drum major and a V for victory as the aircraft carried the markings EQV. It is thought that the girl was based on a comic character who appeared with the fictitious Canadian band leader Drummy Young. Young was always shown as fighting against the forces of evil during World War II, and many of the plots involved well-endowed young ladies and a scantily dressed girl drum major. These young female characters were always seen at the mercy of some evil villain until rescued in the nick of time by Drummy Young. The artist who painted this was Jerry Lapierre. Next aircraft we have is Ville de Quebec. This nose art was carried by Halifax Mark III, NP 957, and was the first piece selected by Lindsay for return to Canada. NP 957 was delivered to 427 Squadron on 13th of September and received the code L. Her first operation was flown on 24th of September 1944 to Calais. The 40th and last operation with the squadron was a sea mining sortie on February 25th of 1945. The aircraft was then transferred to number 429 Squadron, coded U, and completed 3 operations. It was then assigned to her last squadron, 425 Alouette, where she received the code KWQ, Q for Quebec. The Halifax flew 10 operations, 7 by the crew of Pilot Officer Koliznek, who are believed to have chosen the nose art. The aircraft completed a total of 53 operations. Next up, we have Halifax Willie the Wolf from the West. Now, this is the same aircraft we saw earlier with the tail art from old dadi, and this aircraft was a Mark 7 LW-207 that was selected by Squadron Leader Pattison as his brand new Mark 7 for his personal aircraft. It was issued the markings OWW and W for Willie, and so the name Willie the Wolf from the West was selected because it was also the name he named his previous aircraft, which was a Mark 3. And it's the name of a song from that time. Now, this Patterson and crew went on to fly 16 operations on this aircraft between June 23rd and August 10th of 1944. The aircraft was damaged on October 10th, and after repair received the new code letters OWK. It completed a total of 58 operations with number 426 Squadron. After being damaged again, it was transferred to 408 Squadron on April 20th of 1945. Now, for some reason, the new crew painted over the nose art name and most of the artwork, leaving only the wolf's head. As well, 14 white bombs were added. Now, just to make things confusing, there's going to be another aircraft called Willie the Wolf. This was a Halifax Mark 7, serial number NP707, and was delivered to number 432 Squadron, where it was marked QOW, and flew its first operations on July 11th of 1944 to Thiverny. The aircraft completed 67 operations with the squadron, 24 of them by Pilot Officer Potter and crew. Perhaps they were the crew who gave her the name, Willie the Wolf. The nose artist was Thomas Dunn from Winnipeg. He had drawing talent, but had received no training until high school when he enrolled in hand lettering. He was an RCAF airframe mechanic at Eastmoor, Yorkshire, where No. 432 Squadron was based. Tom began painting Halifax Nose Arts in the spring of 1944 and had completed 7 when NP 707 arrived on July 5th of 1944. Willie the Wolf was a big hit with the squadron, and for his nose art talents, Tom received £5, which was $25 Canadian at the time, which was a lot of money in 1944. This is the largest nose art panel in the collection and measures 11 foot 3 inches wide by 5 foot 1 inch high. On 10th of June 1976, the War Museum allowed the RCAF's officer mess in Ottawa to take loan of Canada's largest original nose art. And finally, just to make things more confusing, there's a third aircraft called Willie the Wolf. This was a Halifax Mark 7, serial NP 717, and was assigned to 408 Squadron on the July 13th of 1944. The aircraft received the code letters EQW and flew her first mission on August 4th, 1944 to bomb Bois de Cassan in France. 19 different crews flew this aircraft, 13 completing only one operation in the aircraft. Now, 2 crews did fly her the most. Pilot Officer Barber and crew completed 10 operations, and the squadron leader Rosenberry flew her on 12, including her last on May 18th, 1945, to Heligoland. And of course, as I'm editing this video, I realized I completely missed one of the aircraft, and that is Fangs of Fire. Now, this was a Halifax Mark III, serial LV953, was delivered to 431 Squadron on March 22nd of 1944. Now, before seeing any action, it was transferred to 424 Squadron and then again to 420 Squadron on March 25th of 1944. Now, between April 20th, 21st, 1944 and January 16th, 17th of 1945, this aircraft completed 73 operations. 19 of these were flown by Flight Sergeant Burton and crew. So the nose art was painted by Floyd Rutledge, and he got the idea from a Walt Disney ad that appeared in the November 1944 issue of the Saturday Evening Post magazine. And here's a picture of what that ad looked like, and you can see how similar the nose art is to exactly what was in this magazine. And once it completed those 73 missions, the aircraft was deemed surplus to needs and set aside for disposal.
These 14 nose art panels represent aircraft that flew a combined 700 operational missions during World War II. And standing here and looking at these, it's very different than looking at an aircraft in a museum or an airworthy warbird. These are the exact panels, unrestored, that Canadian pilots, ground crew, and service members touched, flew in, and sacrificed during World War II. And it's amazing the presence and feeling you have standing here looking at these. And the next time you guys are here in the museum, don't forget to look up and see these while you're here. It is an amazing experience. I recommend it for everybody. I wish it was a huge neon sign that said, look here. It's an amazing experience. I'm gonna wrap it up here. Thank you to the War Museum for letting me film here on site, and thank you for all of you for watching to this point in the video. I appreciate it. We'll see you all next time.